I thought, okay, what makes a black belt listener? Like what makes someone great at listening? So I just got really fascinated with this subject. So I've been like delving in over the last few months, and I just went on a massive mission to like read and research, speak to people. I sometimes have these little mini projects and I like disappear for a few days and I'm just like Googling and listening to videos, and I found some really interesting things.
Welcome to Happy Millionaire, a show about how to make profit with a positive impact and stay happy along the way. So yeah, Rochelle is doing her hen's lunch thing today. Yeah. And it was a bit of a madhouse earlier. Her mum flew all the way from Sydney to London to surprise her for this hen's lunch, which is pretty mad in itself. And we've had a whole bunch of her girlfriends over here. They're all like, getting ready and like champagne. And now just got like peace and quiet. I'm looking after Nutmeg, little puppy, and doing this. So I'm looking forward to chatting, man. I've got quite a few things that I want to chat to you about, but I'll give you an update on the business and everything. But how are you?
Yeah, everything is good, man. I'm just a bit jokes if they all come back while we're recording the podcast, right? Get like 20 women.
Oh, no.
Hey, what's going on?
That will not be jokes. That will not be jokes. That'll be very loud. For you, yeah. It'll be like a proper rowdy Australian girl crowd. They're fun. They're fun girls. A lot of them have got like kids and stuff, so you'd think they're a bit tamer, but they're Aussie, so they're going to be pretty loud.
Yeah, no. Looking forward to the chat as well, mate. I think we're going to cover probably a few topics today, and I definitely want to stick some curveballs in for you and for us, so it should be a fun one.
All right. Okay. Cool. Yeah, let's do it. We're just talking about the stag. So recently I had my stag. It was in New Orleans. It was a big surprise. A bunch of my friends are from America. And then you flew all the way from Bali. You pulled the longest trip. How was Bali?
Oh man, Bali is incredible. Like everyone talks about it. I think you'll find a lot of people that are in couples, like they've probably gone there because it's just one of those places you got to go. But if you're just going there to check it out just as a holiday, it's honestly, it's stunning. It was one of those places where you went there and you went, wow, okay, do you know what? I could actually live here. It's very rare.
No way. Everyone says that whenever they go on holiday.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. You're like, okay, but I did actually I could foresee myself like staying there for a window of my life, like a chapter, like, whether it's 6 months, a year, 2, okay, like not forever, but like, you could see yourself having an incredible life there.
Well, let's talk about that now. So like, because I'm thinking, obviously getting married this year, we want to start a family at some point pretty soon. We have a puppy already. We live in the centre of London. Yeah. Rochelle works in Central. I can work wherever, apart from when I'm doing clinical work. I can generally do my podcasts, the tech stuff, or sort of my speaking events are generally like either virtual or I make the special effort to go in to do that. So when I was in Australia earlier this year, I was literally working from like my future mother-in-law's desk. So I can generally work anywhere, but there are loads of, trade-offs, I guess, from, depending on where you want to actually be located. Well, what do you think? Because you live in the centre of London.
Yeah. I think it's a very personal decision. I don't think there is a right answer. And I think the way I look at it is that there's different chapters. And I think the big decision for me is just like, where do I want to live for a long period of like the long chapter, right? And that's probably when you first have kids and you want to go through schooling and that, because I think that window is probably like 15 years, 10-15 years, right? If you look at data or if you just look at your friends, like there's that big window where you live in a property and you're somewhere and you really build a family and, just your life in that area. And I think that's the period it feels like you're coming towards. So
I think it depends on the type of person you are, right? I'm a creature of habit. I like routine. Like I get up first thing in the morning, 5:30 in the morning. I do like, my meditation, stretch routine, affirmations, all that kind of jazz. I like to have a park near me that I can go to. Like I have like loads of things that I feel that I need to have sort of built into my life. And for some people that sounds super boring. They're a bit more nomadic. They want to pick up the bags and go somewhere new every 3 months. That's just like not me. And also I think when you have kids in the equation, you can live that nomadic lifestyle, but there are trade-offs in terms of like, you have to put a lot more effort into homeschooling or like just researching like where they're going to have the best education opportunities, which is important for me. So Yeah, I think it comes down to the type of person you are. So I think also for me, I'm fortunate to have parents who are like very willing to be babysitters. So I know I need to be like close to them.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other thing is like how much space you actually want and how much you're willing to invest in that. So living in the center of London, unless you can afford a house like 1.5, 2 million plus, it ain't going to happen in terms of like having amount of space unless you want to go further outside. But then you trade off like your commute. So I know it's a bit of a tough one because as an entrepreneur, a term that I'm like getting used to calling myself with, it's easier for me to do what I want to do on a day-to-day basis than it is my partner who is tied to a job where she has to be present in the office and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, you make the choice to live in central London. Why?
For me, like I've realized a lot of my life is around central London because the people I meet, all my startups are in London, the investors, a lot of my friends, like right now, and plus my parents, I'm only like 30 minutes away from my parents. So for me, like central London it just makes sense. Like, weirdly, there's no one suburb that I've fallen in love with, or like even further out. Like some people love like Essex or like Hampstead or like, some area like North London or even like Reading. The one thing I have noticed are the people that have moved further out, their property is much bigger, it's much more spacious, and like, they are living that amazing suburb life, but they don't really socialize that much. They claim they will, and they'll hold these parties and stuff, but they don't. Like I've watched them a lot. I've watched a lot of my friends, family, and like they're like, yeah, we're gonna go further out. I'm gonna invite everyone, and like honestly, like they don't. So I've seen that happen as well, and I think you got to ask yourself: are you actually one of those people that will make an effort?
Yeah, I think like there are a few things that if I'm painting a picture of the perfect sort of setup I have, right, this is a bit like blue sky thinking, but close enough to parents, but not too close that they can sort of, just pop in whenever. Like, I think it should always be like a sort of like organized fun visit where like they're involved, but not too involved. Indian parents, they can definitely be a bit overbearing. Second thing, you're close enough to your friends where you can just have like a random meetup. Like you can call me and be like, oh, let's meet up in the park or let's go for lunch or whatever. And the other thing that I want to make sure that we've built into our life is the opportunity to go and spend at least 1 to 2 months in Australia to make sure like, Rochelle is getting time to see her family and her parents. She's made that decision to stay in London and there's a trade-off there. But like I've got friends in Australia who live there, worked there for like 2 years. I've got like a real connection with Australia. And so I want to have to build that in somehow. And she can work from the offices there actually. I'm already like forward thinking like to try and make this a reality.
And then also, the big question is like, do you rent or buy? And like, when do you buy? And one of the silly mistakes I made, well, I think it's silly, is I actually I own 2 flats and I'm selling them both. I'm in the process. I've already sold one, nearly. Whoever's listening, please can just sign the papers and get on with it. But yeah, the other one I'm in the process of selling. Like honestly, like me holding these properties, like yes, you make rental money and all that sort of stuff, but I don't know. I just don't think it's as good now, and I don't know. I don't enjoy managing properties. I just don't. I didn't really get into that.
Mate, let me double click on that because my sort of mentality is very much influenced by my parents, right? Who are like, make sure you get yourself a decent asset like a property, make sure it's like, money working for you and then just like build on top of that. And I think that's sort of like been a common thread through success stories, particularly within our community over the last like few decades that we've sort of, bit putting down roots in the UK and abroad as well. But I hear a lot of tech bros like you talking about why you should be renting and actually putting your capital in, across different sort of asset classes beyond property.
I like looking a bit in the future, and I realize that sometimes a lot of people that maybe in their 20s, they buy a flat in London, but what they're not realizing is that they're not going to live in that place forever. It's only going to be a chapter, like 2, 3, 4 years, right? And then they're going to go most likely buy something else. So what you're now going to do with that asset, like properties don't make that much money, right? Like the appreciation maybe like 5% a year, and you might get some rental income if you rent it, which is going to be like 3, 4%. So let's say you own a property that's, $500,000, right? And you make 3%, you might be making like £15,000, but you've just like deposited a good chunk of your money. So like the question I ask is that, are you going to carry on? You got to ask if you're going to carry on owning that flat and then go buy another house. Are you going to need to sell that flat to then buy your bigger house? But then that whole period of you buying and then selling, like you're paying stamp duty, you're going to go through that stress of selling. And yes, you save probably a little bit of money on rent because you're paying for the mortgage instead of paying for the rent. And yes, you may be saving some, but like the amount of headache you're going through in that period to just do that, is it worth it? And then the second question, the other part is like, can you make a better return on your money somewhere else? And this again is a personal situation where like we're all experiencing different areas. Like mine is tech, and I do understand the stock market because I've had a short space in finance. So I spent, I had a few years in finance. So I get the stock market and I get the tech side. And right now I can get very good return for my money. I can probably make 30 to 50% a year. So if I have £100,000, I reckon I could turn that to 130 to 150,000 pounds, right? I'm very lucky because I've got the experience, right? I built it up. Didn't just come, so therefore I can get a better return with my money in my tech investments or my stock investments versus the house. However, the house is a safe bet. So what I'm doing is more risky.
That's, to me, sounds like super risky. Like I would much rather just buy property somewhere around or just outside London. It's going to appreciate over a 10, 20 year period anyway. And I can just sort of forget about it. But it sounds like you've got a lot more, you're bullish on like your abilities to convert cash.
Well, yeah, so I guess it's that. But then also like, I think let's say you did buy a flat, right? Let's say you bought a flat for £500,000, right? In 4 years time, you now want to buy a house. And most likely you want to buy something that's really nice, right? You want to go up, right? Most likely you don't want to go down. You don't want to be flat. You want to buy something bigger, right? And also buy something bigger, you're going to obviously have to put a bigger deposit, right? And therefore, most likely to buy the best house, because one thing I've learned from all my friends who've got like houses whether it's small or big, they've said, I wish I got something a bit bigger, because they realize, wow, this is a 15-year like period. And so most likely to have the cash to build that bigger house, you're going to have to sell your initial flat. So there's a lot of personal questions that you got to ask, like how long do you want to stay in this flat? What's your budget? Do you see yourself going further out? I think there's so many like dynamics you got to look at.
Yeah. This brings me on nicely to a topic I wanted to ask you about. Have you heard of something called the Marshmallow test?
No.
I'll tell you about it. So it's relevant to our discussion right now, but I think it's also relevant in sort of my space of like health and well-being and all the rest of it. And actually the impact of investing in our psychological skills and our sort of like self-improvement as it pertains to like physical well-being. But anyway, like long story short, in the 60s, there was this guy called Walter Mischel or something like that. So in this experiment at Stanford, where they do a lot of behavioral psychology experiments and all this kind of stuff, they got a whole bunch of kids. And they put them in this room, and they gave them these marshmallows, like one each, right?
Yeah.
And they would say, okay, look, here's a marshmallow. I'll leave the room. I'm going to come back in like 10 minutes. If you don't eat the marshmallow, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows. And so lo and behold, they give them the marshmallow and they leave the room. And then some of the kids are like, fuck this, I'm just going to eat the marshmallow. They eat the marshmallow. And then other kids are able to delay gratification with the expectation that, you know what, I'm going to get 2 marshmallows in the future. And what they found, they followed up these kids, and they've done this like a repeated number of times. They found that those people who are able to delay gratification have better life outcomes. So they measured their like grades in school, their educational attainment, even things like weight, like BMI and other sort of life measures of like, you know, how happy they are and contentment and stuff. And this brings me on to a nice fact, because right now I can afford to rent a much nicer place that I'm in at this point in time. You know, if I'm spending 4.5, 5K a month, let's say in London, I can get like a nice like 3-bed apartment. It's close to a park or whatever. Or I can like rent something a lot smaller, save up such that I can buy a place that I own, or I can like rent something better in the future. I'm not sure, but like this whole sort of process of delayed gratification is something I'm trying to sort of infuse into my life on a day-to-day basis, because I think it's a really, really important thing.
It is quite linked to what we said before, right? Because I say that you're holding back on buying something now and buy something bigger later on. So I can see the link there. But also when you're saying that, I think like one thing that's really pops out, it was popping out, I just kept still, I was listening to you. You know, like when I left my corporate job to then set my tech company up, like there was a period for 2 years where I made no money, right? I went back to go live with my parents. I left
Yeah.
an incredible job in banking, on the trading floor to essentially set my own company up. And for 2 years, I went back home, made no money. And even my first salary was like 30 grand, and then it went up to 40, 50, and eventually got to an okay amount, right? But the only time I made my serious money in the last, let's say, the last 8 years, right, was actually when I sold some of my shares in my company. And that's when the amount I made was a really good amount. But I missed out for the last 8 years. Like I didn't make much good salary. Like,
Mm.
so if you had to benchmark, so if we did two lives, right, you've got the corporate life, like, and loads of my friends went on the corporate side. Yes, on the graph, they made a lot more now over me, but now it's like, it's a different story, right?
100%. I agree. And actually, as you're saying that, I'm realizing that this whole concept of delayed gratification is applicable probably to most entrepreneurs
Yeah.
in their ability to succeed. Because using my example, and I'm not like, trying to boast on the pod or whatever, but let's say even from the point of starting Doctor's Kitchen, my podcast alone will satisfy a good sort of six-figure sum salary every single year. On top of that, adding my books as well, that's another six-figure a year salary. On top of that, like the corporate gigs and all the rest of it, that's a good, like, decent amount of wealth for
Right.
one person to have with minimal team. So it's actually like not a bad lifestyle. But what I've done is put all of that money, pay myself pittance over the last few years. I mean, the podcast took a while to get to that point. It was 3 years without making a single penny. But I'm putting all that capital into my tech company, not paying myself anything. And so I'm in the process of constantly delaying gratification. I'm not like a pauper or anything like that. I'm not sleeping on the streets, but I'm delaying and taking a massive personal risk by putting everything into my tech company, building it from scratch, bootstrapping it to the point where now, we're still not profitable, but I'm pushing like a big rock that I've made myself uphill.
Yeah.
And I have that sort of like confidence in myself. I think that's really important as well, that you can actually achieve it. But still, everything is a massive gamble that you've done, and that I've just had an epiphany as you were talking about it
Yeah.
now, that I'm kind of like currently doing.
You have reached the top of what you do, but you're now going to another category. Like, let's call it another category, maybe bigger or smaller, I don't know. But
Yeah.
you're joining the tech category. I feel that if you deliver what you plan to do, which I know you will, in the tech space, it's bigger than the others. So from both just an impact and wealth. So yeah, you've rolled the die. Like, I think it's rolling the die. And it's weird. Another one came as well while you're talking. It's just like relationships, right? Like, I've seen people
Yeah.
go into relationships with certain people where they're good. Like, they're good people to go be in a relationship and even potentially marry, because they may find a way for it to work. But you could argue that if they'd waited, and they could have found someone better.
To use a colloquial term, like people always talk about like settling. Oh, I settled for this salary, or I settled for this person. You also have to measure that against the inherent risk. Like if you look at most startups, I think some crazy statistic, like over 90% will go to zero. And if you sort of delay too long, it's like, well, you're going to end up with nothing. So there's like that fine balance that everyone's trying to curate of like, okay, I'm gonna delay it just enough such that I get the win that I'm happy with. And I think it is also about like what actually makes you happy, because for a lot of people, having a nice salary with a consistent income, doing something that you love, is a fantastic outcome. And you have to sort of like measure it against, okay, what's actually going to make you happy? What actually do you want to achieve? And actually, are you doing this out of ego? Or are you doing out of like a genuine sort of passion to create health and well-being for people, like inspire people, whatever your ambitions are. I've had to sort of like think about that a lot myself in this whole journey. But yeah, it sounds like you're sort of getting to a point where you've got enough capital yourself, you're sort of satisfied that monetary itch, and now you're doing something slightly different.
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, I feel, I think life's full of loads of games, right? You've got the career game, you've got, the relationship game, you've got like the impact game, like, how much can you give back? You might have the let's have a kid game. you've got, hey, they can have the best relationship game. There's so many like games to play in life, and I think for the last 8, 9 years, I definitely went all in on, the career game, and yeah, I'm super satisfied in that space, and it is like my passion, and I'll continue it. But yeah, I think life's about playing the different games, right? And I think for me, this is like starting the podcast. I've been kicking the can about a bazillion times, and I'm doing it now. Um,
Yeah, man.
and yeah, I just felt that this is the game I want to play as well as some other games. So I think that's what we all go through phases in life, right? We need to just make sure we play different games. So at the moment, I'm getting basically lots of people pitching to my brother and me for investments, right? So for context sake, my brother and me, we've now invested in like 30 different businesses. And I love the process. Like I love, meeting these founders and they're pitching to me. And what I've realized is that some of the conversations is great. Like, I love it. And then honestly, there's a big number where like, honestly, it's just not enjoyable. Like I just don't enjoy the process. Okay, sometimes maybe the idea is not good and, therefore I may have lost interest. But most of the ideas that come to me are through referrals. So, people that I really respect in the community have, sent me these people to come and meet. And so they're usually vetted deals. So they're usually quite good deals. But so I've been trying to work out like what's been happening in these conversations. Like why am I not that engaged or excited? And honestly, the light bulb moment hit me probably like a few months ago. I realized that what was happening was I was speaking to these people, I was asking them questions like these founders, and what I realized was they weren't answering my questions. I know it sounds so obvious, but they just like, I'd ask a question and they'll just be talking about something else. And they would just go on this massive riff.
Give me an example. Like what are you talking about?
So, a simple one would be like, why this problem, right? And they'll just start talking about all the other problems that they looked at, and then they came back to this one, but like, they've just like lost my engagement for 5, 10 minutes. It's like they had this story already planned in their head that they wanted to just release. Yeah. Whereas I just like, hey, let's talk about this one, like why this one, right? But they talk to me about like 2 or 3 of the other ones, which are totally unrelated, right? It's like, they're trying to maybe create a product on like health meals, right? But then they're now talking about how they were creating like this advertising business and something else. Like they're totally unrelated. And I'm just like, God, man, like, just ask a simple question. Or like, how much you're looking to raise. And they'll be like, they just go off on some random topic. And I'm just like, just tell me how much you're looking to raise, dude. Like, come on, man. Like, and what it comes down to is that I've realized how humans, like, what I'm starting to realize as humans, that what we're trying to do is when you're listening, you're trying to find for things that maybe you agree with that person or disagree, or you got stuff on your mind and you just want to release it, right? And the actual ability to listen from humans is what I discovered in this period is not very good. And it's both for men and women, right? But I can tell you one thing, women were better, for sure. Not trying to like diss my man race, right? But sometimes you even see it with friends, right? Like you're chatting to some friends and they're just like not there. Like they're not really listening, right? And I thought, okay, what makes a black belt listener? Like what makes someone great at listening? So I just got really fascinated with this subject. So I've been like delving in over the last few months, and I just went on a massive mission to like read and research, speak to people. I sometimes have these little mini projects and I like disappear for a few days and I'm just like Googling and listening to videos, and I found some really interesting things.
I'm a terrible listener, especially when it comes to like me and Rochelle, but I mean, she always reminds me of that. But like, how do you become a better listener?
Okay, before I go into some of the gems I found, right? Like what I found, which was interesting, was that when someone's speaking, you only retain like 25% of information. So we generally like don't retain much anyway. And you've got this conversation happening in your head, and you've got this conversation happening, right? So like with me, you're listening to me, which is maybe generating some thoughts, and you're listening to yourself and you're listening to me. It's like you're a bit confused, which one should I speak about? So like we're going through this massive like cycle. And also on the internet, by the way, there's a lot of crap on like how to be a good listener. It's like, empathetic, like all the classic stuff. Yeah. I finally found something. There's this guy called Yen Su, which is this Chinese like things like a monk or just a spiritual teacher, like, and he's just a really deep dude, right? Like super, super deep. And he said something that to me was quite profound. The best listeners don't listen with their ears. They listen with their eyes and their heart, and then their ears. So actually, the best listeners are just feeling with their eyes and their heart what the other person is saying. And what that is you're basically now feeling their energy. By feeling their energy, you're basically somehow becoming them, and you can feel their emotion, you can feel like their heart, and then the words, which is the ears. And what he really said was that listening is not just about the ears, it's actually a full experience. Like listening is not you listen to my words, it's listening to my energy, my emotions, like how I'm feeling. And that's more important than the words. So, and it's actually the opposite of what we're being taught, because everyone goes, hey, you've got two ears, one mouth, like listen with your ears. But actually listening is not, it's more about the feeling first and then the words. And really, it's quite hard because I've been trained to listen with my ears. Like I'm listening to words all the time, but actually I'm supposed to just listen to more about the tone, the body language. And I don't know, it's only when that person said that, listen with your eyes and heart, it all started to make sense, because empathetic, being like showing empathy is like you being that person. Because what happens is to be that person, you have to be them, and to be them, you've got to feel the energy and emotion. So that's first, and then the words. So it was the first like light bulb moment for me to go, okay, wow, like that's what real listening is. And that's what like life coaches do. That's what like, they're just like, they take that space, they're feeling it. So
do you have a life coach?
yeah, I do. I've had one for like probably the last 4 years. The person does change. The person I've been with right now, I've been with that person for a year, and like every 2 weeks I speak to them. Yeah, it's probably one of the best things I do, hands down.
What do you chat to them about like every 2 weeks? Is it like how you're feeling, like what you're up to in business, or like how does it structure? I haven't had a life coach. I've only had a business coach.
I've had some life coaching where it's like a lot more structured. You come in with like a really strict agenda, and it's a bit more like militant, which is good. Like some people like that sort of structure. I'm more of a flow person when it comes to these, and we really just talk about some of the key things that are in my life, and it's probably around just how I'm feeling in life. Maybe some things that I've learned that I wish, like some things that I've learned maybe over the last 2 weeks. We'll talk a bit maybe about some challenges maybe at work, relationships. So right now, like I'm single, so I've come out of a relationship and I'm single. So I'm like, therefore I feel that, like I'm going through obviously different emotions through that journey. So we talk a bit about that. So it's really topics that are on my mind, and it's just a way for me to like release it. Like the goal of a life coach is to create space, to exactly what I said, like to feel my heart, or like use their heart and eyes to feel me, and release that emotion out of me. It's just like it's all of this like blocked up energy in us. We just need to release it out, and that's what the life coach does. Is cleansing me to hopefully so I can be more pure for the world. Like that's how I look at it. Because I'm dirty inside. Like
There's
all
a lot
of
of cleansing to do. Yeah. There was definitely going to be a joke in there.
Yeah.
That's cool,
So
man. I didn't know
so
that.
why haven't you
I
got
had no
one?
idea.
You thought about it?
I thought about it, but like I think my sort of thinking about it is kind of superficial. Like I'm thinking of like how am I going to accelerate my business? How am I going to ensure that it's everything is aligned with what I want to build. My sort of focus, as you know, like whenever we're chatting on the phone, is okay. What are the next steps for me? How do I ensure that I'm going to achieve my goals? And so that's why I'm sort of like on the superficial edge. I feel like I'm kind of aligned. Like as a result of my job, I get to speak to some incredible minds and incredible people who always talk about alignment. And I feel that alignment. But you're right, man. I should probably get like some sessions where I speak to a life coach just so I can actually dive a bit deeper. I feel like I don't bullshit myself. I feel that if I know that I'm saying something with my mouth, but in my head and my heart, I'm feeling something different, I can call myself out about it. And it doesn't get so far down the road where I'm like in a position where I feel like I can't get out of it or I feel stuck. And I think that sort of mismatch between what people really want and what they're doing, like I feel like I don't have that. So maybe I've never felt the need for a life coach in that respect, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also maybe there's a bit of arrogance around there, like how much can a life coach actually help me? I'm sure they could, but
No, what you're saying is that you're living in congruence, right? It's basically what you're saying, right? You're living with what your heart's telling you, right? And that's
yeah.
beautiful. What I found was, I think life coach is one of those things where it's like having a personal trainer in the gym. I'm hoping everyone's probably tried a personal trainer session, right? It's like sometimes you don't realize there's other levels of like ways to live. And what I like, so life coach will push you. It'll just like in a very gentle way. The life coach shouldn't be like pushing you to like make big decisions, but like they're like gently like making you think a bit more about your decisions to maybe dream bigger
Yeah.
or to maybe change, like, you know, question some of your thoughts because sometimes we say things which actually may not be the right thing. And they might be blatantly obvious to someone else, but to us it may not be. So like it's just another way of looking. Like, I don't know, like one thing, for example, for me, which I'm happy to share, is like on like dating, right? Like, I felt like I've got a lot to offer someone, and we went through like, you know, all those different areas, and then what I wasn't factoring enough on, like this was probably earlier, was like, you know, no matter what I bring, like like a relationship whoever I meet, it's a two-way thing, right? Like, fine, I might bring a lot, but they might not care. Like what I've got may not be right for them. It's a two-way decision. Like I have to pick them and they have to pick me. And like the moments if like, for example, someone didn't pick me, I would get like really like emotional. I'd be like, oh, what's going on? Like what's, and like, because we all in, you know, in our own lens, we all think we're great, right? But you know, the moment we get someone that maybe doesn't like us and we can't figure it out, we start trying to put logic into it. And we're like, hey, like this doesn't make sense. Why is this happening? But you know, sometimes in life it's like it just doesn't connect, right? That person, and for whatever reason, I don't have those qualities. And even if I can't figure out, it doesn't, like life is illogical. Like I was trying to make logic out of an illogical situation, right? It's like in goals, there's like finite goals. Like a finite goal would be like, hey, okay, you are now in a relationship. You've made that goal. But there's also an infinite one. Is like, hey, like, is this partner the right one for me, or is this like there is no right answer? And it was only when he started questioning, he's like, hey, like you're talking a lot about what you bring, like have you thought like they may not like what you've got? I'm like it sounds so simple, but it's just like these other, like they make you look in the lens of the other person, and plus they hold you accountable. So sometimes I say stuff on the session and then like next week I go in, I'm like promise something, I'm like, oh shit, he's gonna catch me out, please don't. I'm like trying to hide that. I know that person might come, but like I know it's coming. So that's also why it's quite good.
This kind of brings me on to another topic actually I wrote down in the document here. Actually, it's called the Stockdale Paradox, and the reason why I don't know whether I'm just convincing myself, but I think the reason why I haven't invested the time and energy into getting a life coach is because I feel like I know a lot about the teachings and the learnings. I know a lot about the exercises. For me, it's more about implementation, actually giving myself the time to implement them. So have you heard of the Stockdale Paradox? It's like,
No.
so Stockdale, this guy, it's a pretty brutal story really, but like, so he was a Vietnam prisoner of war, and he was locked up in this like infamous prison, where I don't want to go into too much detail, but like he was badly, brutally sort of tortured, right? And it's you know, very very well known story. He probably got like a whole bunch of like medals and stuff when he came back. But basically, the Stockdale Paradox is a technique where you're not dosing your reality with toxic positivity. You're not just saying, oh, everything's hunky-dory, like, you know, I'm actually very happy and I'm grateful for the experience. You're confronting the brutal reality of like, this is fucking shit. You know, I mean, it's literally shit in his reality. But you have this faith that you will prevail in the end. Like, you know, there is going to be a good ending to your story. It's shit right now, but you know, at some point in the future, I have faith that it's going to improve. I think this kind of became popular during the pandemic, where people were turning more to like stoicism. Like, you know, I know Ryan Holiday's book, The Daily Stoic, became like a bestseller on Amazon, even though it's like written a few years ago. You know, a lot of people started reading meditations. Like even I picked up meditations for like the second time, and I started reading a lot about it. But I think as it pertains to this podcast in terms of like entrepreneurs and you know, happiness and stuff, Paul Graham has this famous saying about like startups being the same as being punched repeatedly in the face, but working in a corporate is like being waterboarded. I don't fully agree with the statement, but the premise of it being like a very hard struggle on a day-to-day basis, where you're full of like indecision and self-doubt and all that kind of stuff. It's not the same as being like a prisoner of war in a Vietnam prison, but it's sort of relevant to our discussions on the day-to-day basis. So I'm aware of all these different concepts, and that's why I'm like, I'd rather like spend an hour or an hour and a half with myself and actually try and imbue and infuse these sort of like these perspectives into my day-to-day, rather than like have another conversation with. I think there's probably room for both. I get it, you know, the benefit of having a life coach, but for me, it's like, okay, I know a lot about these exercises. Part of my job is to talk to other people about these sort of themes. And in reality, what I need to do is sit with myself and try and like paint these into my day to day, and just remind myself of, you know, yes, you might be going through a struggle with your business, or you might be suffering indecision or self-doubt, but, you know, good things are going to happen in the end. You got to like really manifest that. I mean, you manifest a lot. We talked about it on the previous pod, right? Like manifesting, you believe in all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, no, definitely. And look, I think with the life coach thing and a lot of things in life, like, you know, sometimes things just come at the right moment, right? And maybe this is not that moment for you to have a life coach, and that's totally cool, man. You got to ask if it's your heart or your ego, right? That's the big question, right? If your heart, but it sounds like it's your heart from, like, you know, because the ego might be a bit afraid. Yeah, the ego might be a bit afraid. Like, ooh, someone else is going to start listening to your thoughts. Like, you know, that voice starts coming. So I think maybe right now's not the right time. And that's totally cool. And you're someone that is proactively trying to get better, and there's some things that you know you want to fix. For me, I look at a life coach like, you know, it's every 2 weeks, or it might be every month. It's just a check-in. I look at it as a check-in. I don't look to like learn new techniques. It's more as a check-in. It's like someone who's like making sure that I am, you know, operating in from the right place, because sometimes I may go off track. I just need one thing also why I think life coach is good is like, this is going a bit raw, but I'm just going to say it out there, right? Like, you know, like you sometimes have people who just like, you know, you do check in saying, hey, how you doing? Next thing you know, like they just literally just go off on one. And it's just like literally bang, 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 bang. You're like, whoa, I just checking if you're all right, man. I didn't like, this wasn't supposed to be like a therapy life coach session. I call it pigeon shitting. Like, so basically like you're just walking in life and you're like, hey, how you doing? And suddenly, or like, you know, your friend suddenly calls and it's like bang, 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 bang. I'm like, yo, I just, you know, hey, I just literally finished my food. I didn't expect all this shit to land on my face. So like, for me, the life coach actually stops me from pigeon shitting. Hoping I don't do that to any of my friends, and to anyone. Like, that's why things like journaling are very good, because you can just release that, you know, the good and the bad thoughts on a piece of paper. And that's why things like yoga, meditation, whatever you want to do, but like just relax and ease the mind is great. And for me, the life coach is it's just another method to make me feel more calm and more peaceful and stop me from pigeon shitting. So that should be probably the sales pitch for a life coach. Hey, stop pigeon shitting the world.
How to stop pigeon shitting. I see a blog post, man. That's a good one. I mean, what was what life-changing takeaways can you take from this conversation?
So the listener topic, I thought that was really on point. Because this is actually, because I'm in meetings with Jay, and this is something that he does. He's like the opposite, because most of the time when we're taught to listen as being silent and waiting for your turn to talk, and that bit where he said you listen with your eyes and your heart, then your ears. And Jay's actually the master of this. When you see him in a business meeting, he basically, like, you often think he's not even listening. He'll be like checking his phone or something, and really, then he'll say something. You're like, fuck, he really, really listened. So it's like the opposite. Most people are acting like they're listening, but they're not actually listening with their heart. Whereas you don't even need to look like you're listening, but if it's hitting you at a deep level, I think that's true listening.
Do you know what? Thanks for that. Thanks for that compliment. Why would you stick that in the podcast? Why would you keep that in the podcast? Why would you just let Amit pop in and just go, hey, dude, you did a summary. It's like my mascot, my biggest fan. Rich, we all right with that? Can we just leave Amit's summary in? That might be actually quite
I think we
jokes.
leave that in, man. That was sick. What was the other takeaway, mate?
The other big one was the Stockdale Paradox. So, yeah, I was just thinking about your morning routine, Rupy, and you were saying about affirmations, but then at the same time, you do need to confront shit. Like people often avoid the things that is causing them stress, but yeah, the confronting the shit, but still having the faith that it will improve. I'm just wondering, how do you balance that with affirmations? Because when I think of affirmations, it's like everything's positive, and then how do you balance that with confronting? Sometimes you're going through the ringers.
100%. So with my affirmations, that is more of a reminder of the end goal, because sometimes when you're in the shit and let me speak like pretty frankly here, life's good, right? Like life is very good, generally speaking, when I think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And just generally where I am in my life and where it has been over the last, every single year of my life, I would say, I can always look back on with positivity because I practice gratitude. But the affirmations are really a reminder for me of like, okay, what the end goal looks like, such that when you're going through a stressful day, which are, most days you're going to have some stresses, whether it's an employee, whether it's indecision, whether it's, oh, we didn't get this contract, or like, oh, I didn't get enough likes on social media, even stupid shit that I really don't want to admit to myself, let alone other people, that actually, does rock my day. It's just a reminder of like that end goal. So to use the extreme example that Stockdale had, was his reality was like being tortured like every other day. But where my affirmations fit in this sort of analogy is his reminder to himself was things are going to get better. I'm going to eventually, whatever the end point is, it's going to get better. And so the affirmations for me serve as that reminder, as like things are going to get better. That's how I fit it into my day.
Yeah, awesome. Makes sense, man. Awesome. And then the last one with the life coach, I was just thinking, I'm similar. I've never thought that I would need a life coach, but then I was just thinking, actually, I'm sure like friends externally will look at me and be like, okay, he's making those mistakes, or there's something he's not seeing, but you can see that in all of your friends. And probably like a life coach is like, you can't tickle yourself. There's things that you're going to be blind to, and having that impartial observer will be good, or something to think about. So those are
I should get a life coach.
I think
basically, Rupy, stop bigging yourself up. You need to get a life coach. Yeah, sit yourself down. You don't know everything.